Hello and welcome to the Mets in the UK podcast, your place for all things Mets from a UK point of view. We are back with the first of this season's off-season guest series. We are joined by our beautiful Tracey, as always. Hi, Tracey. How are you?
I'm good, my darling. How are you?
I'm fabulous. I'm a little bit excited because to kick off the guest series this evening, we have one of my favorite people in the world. We are joined by Mets radio legend Howie Rose. Hi, Howie. How are you?
Hi, Toria. Hi, Tracey. Aren't you sweet? That's nice. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. As always, you will find our podcast on all good podcast hosts, Spotify, Apple, all that fun stuff. And you can find us on all of the socials. I'm not going to list them all because they change their names on a daily basis and I will forget one or get it wrong. So, Howie, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you are having a somewhat relaxing off season.
Yeah, it is so far.
So
I'm down here I say down here, I'm across the water from where you are, but I'm south of New York right now in Florida where the weather's really nice and taking advantage of that as best I can.
Excellent. Much deserved. So first things first, one of the things that comes across so much in the radio broadcast is the fact that you are very much a Met fan. Now, I'd love to know how that started and how you then coupled that with broadcasting. Where did that love come from?
It started literally at the very beginning with the Mets because I was introduced to baseball by my dad in 1961, the year before the Mets came into existence. And what a way and what a year to learn about baseball, sitting with your dad at Yankee Stadium with Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle having their epic home run duel, trying to break what had been Babe Ruth's record of 60 home runs in a season. Maris beat that on the last day of 1961's regular season. And then the Mets came along the next year, and I, being the narcissistic 8-year-old that many 8-year-olds are, just assumed that the Mets were created as a gift to me because I was a new baseball fan, and so someone came along and said, "Here you go, kid. Here's a team all your own," and that's kind of how it began.
That's wonderful. I think that they are definitely there for your pleasure and pain at times. Because you can it comes through so well. I think that's what makes a number of the broadcasts so beautiful. And so where did the love of and the interest in broadcasting come from?
I've thought about that a lot. And the very first broadcasting, I don't know about idol necessarily, but just someone who I kind of took a liking to was a fellow I doubt you've ever heard of. His name was Bud Collier, and he was the MC of a couple of game shows that ran in the 1950s and 60s. I was born in 1954, so I was watching TV from a very early age, and there was a show called Beat the Clock and another one called To Tell the Truth. But I first kind of fell in love with the whole idea of becoming a broadcaster, watching Bud Collier as the host of Beat the Clock. And he had what most game show hosts did back then, a long, narrow microphone, which they wore around their neck and would interview the contestants with. And back then, there was a company by the name of Polaroid. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but Polaroid made what was back then revolutionary, an instant camera where you didn't need time to develop the film. You took a picture and a minute later it popped out. And anyway, the film for those cameras was wrapped around a small, somewhat narrow cylinder. And my mom would take the empty spool, tie a string around it, and I would put it around my neck, interviewing my family like I was Bud Collier. So that was my first broadcasting influence when I was about 5 years old, if that, maybe even less.
Oh, that's adorable. I love that.
Aww,
and it's
Howie.
There was a time I was cute, but that's long since over with.
It's interesting that it was, a game show. I mean, was that your aim initially to kind of do TV and that?
I don't think so because what's interesting too is that what really drew me to Bud Collyer wasn't so much the fact that he was basically directing the traffic, if you will,
Mhm.
on the show based on the game, but I like the part where he was interviewing the contestants and talking to people. So that's, I think, what really piqued my interest in broadcasting, more from which I didn't recognize then, but ultimately became an interviewing perspective. And I've always enjoyed doing interviews. I did a talk show for a long time on WFAN radio, and so when I think of where the roots were sown, it was back with
Mhm.
Bud Collyer on Beat the Clock in the 1950s.
And of course, you had the legends to listen to
Mhm.
on Mets radio. I can imagine they perhaps shaped some of the way in which you approach your work.
Oh yeah, sure. In fact, my very first baseball broadcasting hero was Mel Allen, who was the voice of the Yankees that again
Mm.
I was introduced to in 1961. But, as the Mets progressed in their infancy and I was so enamored of all things baseball, the announcers, as you well know, are in your eyes and ears about 7 months out of the
Yeah.
year. And so they become not only familiar, but familial. They
Mm.
tend to feel very much like family. And you've been to the booth, Toria. Those three, the original three Mets announcers, Lindsey Nelson, Bob Murphy, and Ralph Kiner, meant and means so much to me. And I am still to this day occasionally blown away by having followed in their footsteps that we have a framed picture of the three of them in our broadcast booth. And if a game tends to drag on or a season is not going well and that drags on, and I'm starting to potentially lose a little bit of my edge or motivation or whatever, all I need to do is take a sideward glance at that picture and it recalibrates me. It makes me realize how fortunate I am, not only to be doing what I do, but to have followed in my broadcasting hero's footsteps.
That is beautiful, and it's a beautiful, lovely big print in there as well. And
Yeah.
it's pride of place.
I'm sorry?
It takes pride of place.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It ties two ballparks together. None of those three. Well, I shouldn't say that because Ralph would occasionally pop into the booth even after we moved from Shea Stadium to Citi Field. But really, those three worked at Shea and even the Polo Grounds for the first 2 years before that. So yeah, it does link Mets history all the way back to the beginning.
So, Howie, you've got a lot of fans that are budding broadcasters. Any tips, advice for those?
Yeah, have your head examined, I mean, because I kid about that, but there's a lot of sacrifice that you make. I was just loony enough to have done baseball and hockey concurrently for a number of years. And, you can only imagine what that does to your family life. And even though both entities were kind enough to allow me to build a little time off into my schedule, it did and has really taken a toll physically and mentally. I wouldn't recommend doing both sports full time to anyone, but you've got to be prepared to work holidays, to have less of a social life than not only you might want, but your spouse or significant other might hope for, and those things have to be worked out. Before you really establish the roots of a relationship with someone, if you're going to be in this business, they need to understand that there are certain sacrifices they have to make. And I'll tell you, my wife has made more than her share, which is why, I'm winding it down now because I owe her some time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So over the years, and certainly, as you know, I listen probably too much.
You can never listen too much.
This is true, yes, but some of us should be sleeping in the middle of the week at
Yes.
midnight, I intend to, it's not intentional. But over the years, certainly from my listening, when I first started, I think it was Wayne Hayden, and then we had Josh, and then Wayne and Jake briefly, and now we've got young Keith and Pat.
Baby Keith, yeah.
Baby Keith.
Young
Baby Keith just had another baby, by the way.
He did. We must
Another
pass on our congratulations.
another girl. We congratulate them.
Yeah. Good luck, Keith. Well
What
done.
if her name is Phoebe?
You'll need it.
But it seems they've Josh went on to do more. Wayne's obviously gone on to Angels. Jake went to do Kansas radio.
Yeah, Kansas City Royals.
Yeah, so it seems that obviously you take these people in and then you develop them and then they go on to do great things. And there's a double-edged question in there. Part of it is, how does that happen, and how is that a conscious effort on your part? And secondly, how much, if any, input do you have on the recruitment of those people? So I'm thinking, largely with this, with Keith more recently, because it was noticeable the relationship that you had with Wayne. It very much played on the younger versus older dynamic.
Yes.
And there was lots of banter there, and that was really, really good as a listener to kind of be able to kind of play about with that a little bit. Was there any kind of conscious decision to keep with that youth, or was it simply just that
It's a good question.
Right time?
It's a good question. And full disclosure, when Wayne left, my initial thinking was, let's get a guy with major league experience, because I think in the number one market in the country, I think we have a right to, expect that we're going to have as polished an announcer as we can get. And for a variety of reasons, we couldn't find the right fit. And so I remember thinking, to answer part of your question, yes, I was given a lot of input in the selection of my partner, and in this case, partners. My overriding emotion became, okay, let's find the next Wayne Randazzo. I wanted at that point a young guy with a lot of upside who could not only grow into the role, but either become my full-time successor someday, or, again, fly out the window to greener pastures as Wayne Randazzo did. And so when we were in the midst of, I guess it was the 2022 season, right? That would have been Wayne's last one. This was Keith's third year, right? So out of nowhere in 2022, Chris Majkowski, the immortal Madge, our producer, engineer, and I received a link out of the blue from this fella named Keith Rad, who had been broadcasting Brooklyn Cyclones baseball, which is A ball. That's a couple steps from the major leagues. And he just wanted a little feedback and wanted us to, kind of get at least recognize him, know who he is. So I listened to it in some spare time, and I thought, sounds pretty good. For a kid that's an A ball, it's not bad. And mentioned it to Madge, and he had the same reaction, but we didn't think any more of it because, we knew we weren't going to hold on to Wayne Randazzo much longer. He was ready to go. And yet we didn't expect it necessarily to come up as quickly as it did. So when we had to pivot after Wayne left, my feeling was, let's go find the next Wayne Randazzo. And there's a very good chance that that's what we did with Keith. I mean, I couldn't be more thrilled and proud of his progress. He's now 3 years into what should be a long, long big league broadcasting career. And as part of your question addressed, I love mentoring young broadcasters. I feel, and I've been taught over the years, that as we progress in our careers, we have an obligation to pay it forward. There were broadcasters who mentored me early in my career, none more so than Marv Albert, who didn't do baseball, but was the voice of the Rangers and the Knicks. That's hockey and basketball in that order for you folks in England who might not be that aware. But in any event, Marv did so much for me that he didn't have to tell me. I knew that if I ever had the chance to mentor young broadcasters as my career evolved, I would pounce on that. And so I've been very happy to do that.
That's lovely. And again, it comes through. And Keith and Pat, you mentioned their progression over the last years. And again, as someone who listens frequently, it's really noticeable, and it has been a joy to hear that progression and that confidence. And they are big league broadcasters now.
Absolutely.
You mentioned Madge, and of course we can't not bring Madge up.
We can't. He's as big a part of our booth as anybody.
Exactly that, right? And I don't. He is mentioned frequently in the broadcasts. I'm not sure people can quite appreciate how much Madge does. He is that I don't know how he juggles everything. And talk to us a little bit about your relationship with Madge and how that works.
Well, I wish that I would have known Madge a lot longer than I have, because if I'd known him when he was in college or maybe just getting out of college, I'd have pushed him to be an on-air performer. I know he gave it a shot, but I don't know that he stayed with it long enough, or maybe recognized that there were other ways to make a living within the business of broadcasting. But first of all, he's got a great voice, for if that's still worth something in radio, because things have changed over the years with regard to that, I think. But more importantly, he knows baseball up and down. He's another set of eyes and ears for us, never mind just getting us on the air. Our personalities are very much simpatico, as is
No
our
comment.
sense of humor. You might want to throw in a no comment there. But there's a second show that goes on, and that's the one that the listeners can't hear between innings, or when we hit that cough button. We're all a little bit crazy in the booth and proud of it. And Madge, we call him, if you've ever seen the movie Stripes, he's our Sergeant Hulka, our big toe. But he's an invaluable resource and a good friend. And he was away for, I don't know, what was it, 6 weeks or so, to take care of an issue during the season this year. And Paul Schrager, his replacement, did a wonderful job. But I felt as though a part of us was clearly missing when Madge wasn't there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with live broadcasting, mistakes happen. What's your biggest mistake?
You do
and how
listen,
did you
don't
deal with
you?
it?
My biggest mistake, it had nothing to do with the Mets, although I guess, on the periphery, it did in a very weak way. But I mentioned that I used to do hockey, and I was doing an Islanders TV game. Oh, probably about 15 years ago now, or something like that. And we were in Atlanta. The Islanders, as they were much of the time that I was there, unfortunately, were a terrible team. And this particular season was no different. I believe they had literally lost 9 or 10 games in a row. We had a game the night before in New York, or Long Island, on Long Island. And then we flew to Atlanta for a game the very next night. So we were in Atlanta, and for whatever reason, the uh, crew that handled a lot of the camera work, the audio, whatever it was, was not great that night. And it became evident very early on. It was going to be a long night technically, and no, it was really. And the shame of it is the game actually got off to a pretty entertaining start, but because of a technical mishap, we thought we were still in commercial when we were not. And there was no indication that we had come back on the air. And it looked like they were about to drop the puck. And I could hear that, and this is what told me that we weren't on the air yet. They were re-racking or rewinding, in simple English, some tape, and I could hear that backwards, reel in my ears. So I didn't think we were on the air, and we had already been told it was going to be a long night technically, and I muttered into a live mic, "Is it spring training yet?" Well, that wasn't the worst of it. I probably could have gotten away with that without too much fanfare. But now they dropped the puck, and I don't think we're on the air, and the game's going on. And I just sit back and said, well, let me know how this game turns out. Not that I particularly care, because at that moment, I didn't give a rat's tail what happened in that game. We were all exhausted. I was snarly. I was in a brutal mood. Again, the team had lost 9 or 10 in a row, got no sleep, all these production problems. I just wanted to go home. You know,
Oh,
we
Yeah.
all have those days at work, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you do for a
of
living.
course.
But when I said, let me know how this game turns out, not that I particularly care. And a lot of Islander fans didn't like me from the beginning anyway, because they knew that I had been a Ranger fan, a Ranger season ticket holder, and perhaps to them, worst of all, a Rangers broadcaster. And even worse than that, a Rangers broadcaster when they won the Stanley Cup. And along the way to the cup, had beaten the Islanders 4 straight in the playoffs. So I wasn't the most beloved broadcaster in Islanders history to begin with. And when those words came out of my mouth, I really thought I was done. I thought they were going to fire me.
Yeah.
And I worked there for another 10 years, I think, or whatever, no, 5, 6. I thought there's no way they'd renew my contract. But, you know, a year or two later, when it was up, they said, yeah, we'll sign you for a few more. So,
You're
okay.
just that good.
No, I don't know about that, but that's pretty embarrassing. That is pretty embarrassing.
You have all the stories, you've got all the facts, it seems, when we're listening to you on the radio. How do you retain all that information? Where do you store it all?
Well, I'm 71 going on 72 years old. I'll be 72 in February, so I'm not sure what I had for breakfast today. But a lot of the stuff that you hear happened so long ago that I was a fan and a very impressionable one. And a lot of the things that I reference just made an impact on me. And that stays with you forever. So
Yeah.
I am much, much, much more conversant on Mets topics and players and games that happened literally 50 and 60 years ago than I am 5 and 6 years ago. Because now a lot of these games kind of go through me in one ear, both eyes, and out the other ear, almost never to be thought of again. I don't know how that works. It's just maybe evolution, or as John said, evolution. But I laugh sometimes when people tell me, boy, you've got a great memory, because I got a golf lesson coming up, my first one since I got back down here. And, you know, this guy really helped me last year. I've already forgotten all of it. I stink as bad. I mean, when I tell you I'm a bad golfer, I mean, Stevie Wonder is a better golfer than I am. Okay. So, you know, now I feel like I'm starting from the beginning again because I can't remember anything. And that flies in the face of what a lot of people seem to think. But if I had that lesson 60 years ago, I'd be a great golfer now.
Well, keep the stories coming, because I love learning more history from you.
Well, midterm and a final. I don't know. Do they call them those in England? I'm so
We do.
fascinated with England, by the way. But anyway,
We have end of year exams generally, and they just have
okay.
mock exams beforehand to get a gauge of where they're at, but they don't really count towards anything.
All right. So do what I do. Sit next to the smart people. Let's go. What was that?
So you spoke about having an impact. One of the things that had an impact on me this season, I was lucky enough to go to the David Wright number retirement.
Oh, wasn't that a great day?
That was so good.
That was an amazing day. I loved it. How do you deal with sort of the emotion and everything that goes with the ceremonies like that?
Well, I'm feeling the same emotions as the fans, and perhaps even to a deeper extent, because, you know, these in most cases are people who I not only covered as a broadcaster, but have become friends over the years, you know? And
Yeah.
David is right, you know, at the top of that list. And so, you know, I don't think there's ever been a figure in Mets history more beloved within and on the outside of the organization than
Yeah.
David. So, you know, we were all really excited for that day. And I think it went swimmingly and
Yes.
about as beautifully as we would have hoped. It was just a magical day and a little bittersweet because we all recognize that David had some of his career kind of pulled out from underneath him
Mm.
because of injury, but it did not diminish the standing of the person, which transcends the standing of the player. And so that's what made that such a special day, because we were honoring such a special person.
Yeah. It was a lovely ceremony. It was really well done by the Mets and yourself.
Thank you.
It was. You mentioned earlier about how you enjoy interviewing people, and obviously
Yeah.
from time to time you get people in the booth. So who is the coolest person that you've had in there?
The coolest person that we've had in there.
Mm.
Wow. Well, anytime you get a great former player in there, that's fun. Um, I remember Tommy Lasorda one day. He's promoting prostate cancer initiative that MLB does surrounding every Father's Day. And Tommy walks in, sits down, and I'd known Tommy a tiny bit. And I said, "Hey, how was that blueberry pie?" And he said, "How'd you know I had blueberry pie?" I said, "Because you're wearing half of it." I mean, that was Lasorda. I mean, you had only had to look at him to know what he had for dinner. But I always get a kick out of those who are not necessarily part of the baseball community. Like Jerry Seinfeld comes in from time to time, and that's always great. I remember Gilbert Gottfried. Do you know who Gilbert Gottfried is? He talks like this. He was a very funny. I apologize because this isn't going to mean much to you, but he came into the booth one time, and the scoreboard keeps track of strikeouts, right? And the symbol for strikeout in baseball scorekeeping parlance is K. And so Gilbert looks up in the middle of the little talk that we're having, and he sees there are 3 strikeouts recorded on the board. He looks up, he goes, "Hey, why does it say KKK up there? What kind of joint did you bring me into?" And I won't get into the history of what KKK means in the States. You can research that if you don't know, and understand why that was pretty funny and could have been considered offensive from someone who had no idea. I don't think Gilbert was much of a baseball fan, but when somebody like that comes into the booth and kind of leaves a mark, if you will, those are the ones I love.
That's cool. And is there anyone who you would love to have in there that you've not yet?
James Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Richard Starkey.
Of course.
That
was a silly question, really, wasn't it?
One of the no, not really. Do you know that I say we, it was really, Steve was the one obviously who was going to really try to make this happen. We tried so hard to get Paul to come to Citi Field this past August 15th, because that was the 60th anniversary of the Beatles' first Shea Stadium concert. And there were some discussions, but the unfortunate reality was that even as we speak, Paul is on tour again. I mean, God bless this phenomenon. He's 83 years old and he's still on tour. And he needed that month, the month of August, to rest up before going out on the road again. So he wasn't making any appearances anywhere, unfortunately. But if anyone's got, there's nothing really left on my bucket. 2 things on my bucket list: meeting Paul and calling the last out of a Mets World Series winner, and Paul, I should say, and Ringo. But I think one of the reasons we connected so much is I've got such a fascination with British history and culture, and a lot of it surrounding the British invasion musically in the 1960s when I was coming of age. And when I've only been to England once, but when I practically wandered into a place I was looking for, 3 Savile Row, which is where the Apple offices were, and which featured the rooftop where the Beatles did their impromptu famous last concert in 1969. I thought I was in Mecca, So I got to get back there one of these days. And the Liverpool. Got to get to
I was
Liverpool.
going to say, you need to, I'll take you around Liverpool.
Well, I would love that.
I'll show you all the Beatles sites in
Yeah, that
Liverpool.
would be very emotional. I mean, for me to be walking around, let's say Penny Lane,
Yeah.
would be
Hmm.
seriously
Yeah.
the real. There's the roundabout. I'd
I
love
get it.
that. I'd love it.
I get it. I get it
Don't it
completely.
sound like a dorky kid?
No, not at all. It's wonderful, and we very much appreciate your love of all things British, because
Hmm.
obviously we're almost like Marmite, I think, in the US.
What's that? Wait, what? I didn't
Like
get that. I'm sorry.
do you have Marmite? I don't know if they have Marmite.
No,
Actually,
no, they don't.
Marmite?
What's the equivalent? I don't know.
What's
Look
But
up
anyway.
Marmite, and basically, if
okay?
something is either loved or hated, one
Oh,
extreme or the other, it's referred to as Marmite because people either love it or hate it.
oh, well, put me in the love category.
Absolutely. There we go.
I did see Churchill's War Room. That was really cool.
That is very cool.
That is, yeah, that's one of my
Powerful stuff.
favourite London
You
things.
just need
Yeah.
to come back.
Yeah,
I'd love to.
we'll be your tour guides. We'd
All
happily
right.
take you around.
Oh, I'd love that. I would love that.
So you've said you love the Beatles, you love London.
Yeah.
Did it sort of come from the Beatles that you love London, or
Yeah.
was it something
Well,
else?
yeah, look, any American kid that, studies the roots of America, the Revolutionary War and all that, of course you're going to have at least a curiosity, because in that sense we are all rooted in British history, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a built-in fascination that at least I have, that goes all the way back to learning about the earliest incarnation of American life, and how it came to be. But clearly, it was the music in 1964. Because I remember, when I heard the Beatles' music, it didn't sound like they had an accent. And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
you hear them interviewed by Ed Sullivan. You know about the Ed Sullivan Show in New York and all
Yeah.
that? Well,
Yeah.
when you heard them talking to Ed or just being interviewed, I thought, what a neat trick. You can have that accent and then just get rid of it to sing. It very rarely comes across, but yeah, it wasn't just the Beatles. It was, the Stones, the Who, the Animals in those days, just all of the British groups that changed music, and in the Beatles case, and others, changed the world. And that's why it's had such a profound influence on me, more than 60 years later. It's a long time.
I love it. And
Hi there.
how aware are you of, obviously I hound you guys all the time, and I always say good morning or good evening or whatever to
Yeah.
Matt. So that some of us around, I think, we have Martin in Denmark, who works nights, so gets to listen
Okay.
pretty much every day. We have our friend CJ in Belgium, who's frequently listening.
Really?
How, if at
Yeah.
all, aware are you guys of that international presence, and how far afield you guys are
I'm
listening
not.
to?
I'm not aware of how sizable or otherwise
There's
it
a lot of
might
us.
be, but yeah, Tracy, just the realization that, because radio's come a long way. I mean, for a business that's not quite what it was, I don't think the impact of radio has ever been any bigger, simply because of what you say, that people are listening across the pond, other parts of the world. Um, it used to be, I guess, you had to listen to Armed Forces radio, and you could
Yeah.
only reel a baseball game, for example, in if it had been specifically directed or picked up by Armed Forces radio. But now, in the digital world, you can listen to anything, anywhere, at any time. And I love that. And the more I hear from people in other countries and even cultures, the better, because it really tells you how the world has shrunk over the years, and to be a part of communicating what's going on in Flushing, New York, with people who, in your case, are across the water, 3,000 plus miles away, and perhaps even further away. I think it's really cool.
It is really cool, and you and I have talked about this before. It's one of the things that, which is why I admire what you do so much, is because when I was first listening, you were making me feel like I was right there, and I'm 3,500 miles away. but you just bridge
Yeah.
that gap completely, and I
Well,
can
thank you.
see and hear and feel everything through you.
Well,
And
that's what radio does, it's the most intimate medium.
absolutely,
Yeah.
there is something so special about listening to a ball game on the radio.
So let me turn the tables for a moment. So how
Mhm.
did you both get involved, not only following baseball, but the Mets specifically from in England?
Tracey, go ahead first.
I've been a Mets fan for 20 years now. I've been to Shea, I've been to City. My first Mets game was September 2006
But how
against the
did it all come
Washington
about?
Nationals.
Like, how would you have even become aware of baseball in England?
There used to be a program once a week on a broadcaster called Channel 5,
Yeah.
and it was one game that was handpicked for each week,
Yeah, the
and
game
that
of
was
the
the
week.
showcase. Yeah, and that was the showcase game, and that's what you get. And it happened to be a Mets game. Fell
Okay.
in love.
Oh, that's great.
Um, Came over on vacation with my now husband. Went to a game, and David Wright hit a home run.
There
Fell
you
in
go.
love. Booked to go the following day as I left the stadium.
That's great.
Yeah.
So it got to you all at once. That's great.
Oh, absolutely.
How
And
about
I'm
you,
just a
Toria?
sucker. I'm just I had an awareness. I've worked for American companies for a long time, so they always got excited about the World Series and the Super Bowl and the NFL. And again, as Tracey mentioned, we had the shows on Channel 5, and we had highlight shows which contained various American sports. But by the time you got around to it, especially in baseball when it's day after day, like it's old news. But my football team were in Europe, and it was exclusively shown on an extra channel that we had to subscribe to separately.
Now, when you say your favorite football team, you mean American football
No,
soccer? What we
Soccer.
call
proper
soccer.
football, proper.
Okay.
So
I understand.
I paid for this subscription, and it was affiliated with ESPN. It's now TNT.
Oh, okay.
It was largely ESPN content, and so they showed and still do baseball pretty much every night. You don't obviously get to choose who's on, but they show baseball all of the time. And I just went, right, I'm paying all of this money. I am going to sit and watch a game all the way through from start to finish, whether I like it or not. I know I like the concept of the game because I've had this peripheral interest. And we played the Braves, and of course we lost. And I just went, well, I like an underdog. And I watched some more, and I listened, and then I signed up for the audio only on MLB at the time because I didn't know how much I was going to use it. So I just kept listening to you guys and learning more and listening more and feeling more, and everything about the Mets specifically just called to me. They were gritty. They were the underdogs. They're a community team. They played for each other. All of those qualities, and it kind of reflects a lot of how my football team is as well. And so, I like to say it was love at first loss.
Me too. But they lost their very first game in 1962.
They lost a lot of games in 1962.
Yeah, they did. But I remember going into my parents' room. My dad was getting ready for work the morning after the Mets had played their very first game, which was the night before. And I said to my dad, I'm 8 years old. How'd the Mets do last night? He said they lost. I was disappointed. So there you go.
Yeah. It just means that we appreciate the highs all that much more.
That's right. Could use some more of them, but
yeah, exactly. And
hopefully.
That's a great point to actually get on to some baseball chat. I mean, what do you make of the 2025 season as was? Now it's over, and you've had some time to reflect.
I think back to a conversation I had with one of the Mets coaches at the time. Most of them have been let go, and this fellow was as well. I won't mention his name, but they had just lost the final home game of the regular season. We were getting ready to go to Chicago and then Miami to close it out. And remember, they'd lost 2 out of 3 to Washington that last weekend, including the Sunday game. And came downstairs waiting to get on the bus, and one of the coaches comes out and we start chatting, and he just goes, I don't know why we're surprised at this point. He said this is what we've been since June for, literally at
Mm.
that point, 3.5 months.
Yeah.
And so when I look back on the 2025 season, I don't so much look at it as, a team that, let a big lead get away, which, they were 5.5 up in June. But
Mhm.
since then, they over the last 93 games were 17 games under 500. That's
Mm.
essentially who they were. And that's what
Yeah.
this particular coach was
Yeah.
telling me. So when I look back on 2025, yeah, you can go, oh man, they had a lead and they let it get away. They should have made the playoffs, even though it went down to the last day. You know what? They weren't a very good team. So you turn the page on 2025. You try to figure out what went wrong, how much you could
Mhm.
attribute, whether to injury, underperformance, overuse with some of the pitchers.
Mhm.
That's for the front office to figure out. They're still putting a new coaching staff together, and they'll make moves. Steve Cohen is
Mm.
not going to sit by idly. I think that was proven with the coaching changes that were made. Not
Yeah.
saying they came because Steve directed them, but I think there's a feeling within the organization that this owner wants to win, and he wants
Yeah.
to win yesterday. And so they will leave no stone unturned in trying to make 2026 a season that Met fans can be proud of.
And do you think that expectations were unnecessarily raised, both from how 24 went and then, of course, the Soto signing and Pete coming back? Do we think that maybe overall expectations were perhaps a little too high, and should we be adjusting them going into 26?
Well, I certainly don't think they were too high in 2025, Toria, because they had every right to be sky high. The way 2024 ended was stupendous. They didn't win a pennant, but boy, you sure went into last off season feeling that they had done everything but. And that once they signed Soto and brought Pete back, it was wow, they're locked in now. This is going to be a good team for a while. And I think it should have been.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out
Mm.
that way. And so now the retooling begins, not a rebuild, just a retooling that hopefully will produce a solid contending team next year.
Here's
But the
hoping.
expectations had every right to be high.
Yeah.
Good. And putting it on the line, does Pete come back?
Boy, I hope he does. I mean, that's just my own personal
Yeah.
feeling. I hope he's back.
Hmm.
I know that he's looking for a 6 or 7 year contract. I would be surprised, as he's 31 years old or will be in December, if he'll get that kind of deal. I would think that a lot of teams looking at Pete would probably want to keep it to about 3, and the one that gets him will probably push to a fourth. And that could very well be the Mets, but I'd be surprised if he got anything beyond 4 years. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong.
Hmm.
There might be a team with a nice 5 or 6 year offer sitting on that general manager's desk, ready to present it to an agent. But, again, just from the standpoint of handicapping this thing, um, I think they're going to try to hold it to 3, and the team that goes to 4 will get him. I don't see it going beyond 4. Could be wrong though.
Here's
Did
hoping.
you catch any of the World Series, and
All of
do
it.
you think the right team won?
Well, that's a loaded question, isn't it? When you're 2 outs away from winning it all and lose the way the Blue Jays did,
Mhm.
they're not mumbling about the right team having won. I mean, they
Yeah.
felt they had it.
Beautiful.
It was such a compelling game and such a compelling series, specifically the way those last 2 games went down. The Blue Jays have every right to believe they were the better team. And over the course of the 7 games, you could probably make the case that they played better than the Dodgers, but not at crunch time, not when they needed to. And
Yeah.
hats off to the Dodgers. They did what champions did or do, and they held off the stiffest of challenges. So in that sense, I'll say, yeah, the better team did win, but it was
Okay.
a great World Series.
It really
Yeah.
was. It was. Our gang were laughing at me because they laugh at me frequently because I always say, I'm not going to watch the game tonight. I'm going to go to sleep.
Yes,
And
you are.
I said,
Yes.
I said, I'm not going to bother watching any of the World Series until it gets to potentially championship winning games.
Mhm.
And of course, I watched like pretty much all of every single game. But it was a fabulous series.
It was.
And especially for neutrals, it was, it was a great advert for the game. Before we get on, if we're okay for time for a few more moments, we have a few questions that have come in for you. But the biggest question that we all want to know, we're going to have more Howie Rose next year, right?
I'm planning on one more year at least. I'm going year to year. I always need a month or so to decompress
Of course.
and make sure my wife will still talk to me. I'm planning on coming back next year. I mean, nothing's on paper yet, and I would say I'm 90% certain that that's what I'm going to do. But I'm not thinking beyond next year. I just, again, go a year at a time.
Which is perfectly fair. But
thank you.
We need Howie. We need Howie.
Yeah, we want to keep you.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
So, as Toria mentioned, we do have a few listener questions.
We'll try and get through them as quickly as we can.
Yeah. Our friend Andrew Sherwood wants to know, what was it like the day that you called 253 for Pete Alonso? What was it like in the booth?
I'm trying to remember now because Keith made the call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people might think I'm disingenuous when I say this, but I've said many, many times before, there's only one Mets call that I'm dying to make, and that's the ultimate one for them winning a World Series. I've called them winning a pennant. I've had those glorious words come out of my mouth. The Mets win the pennant. I got to do the first no-hitter in Mets history, which I never thought, frankly, was ever going to happen. And with all the other thrilling moments I've had, Mike Piazza's emotional home run 10 days after 9/11, I've had my share of big calls, and I had a whole career's worth of opportunities to make big calls in the 2024 postseason. So I'm fine when it comes to somebody else having a moment like Keith had with Alonso's 253rd. So when he hits that home run, I'm just sitting there going back thinking, or leaning back, I'm just watching Keith and thinking, this is so cool for Keith, because this is probably his first one. I mean, I don't remember any other specific moments that were that memorable, but when somebody comes along and breaks the all-time franchise home run record, because there's a build up to that moment. It could have been my inning, it could have been Keith's, it could have been Pat's, depending on where the game was. So I'm just sitting there watching Keith make the call, going, this is really cool for him. I'm so glad he's having this moment. And he nailed it.
He did.
Yeah. That sort of follows on to another question we've had from Shea Parking Lot on Twitter. They would like to know, do you have a World Series winning call prepared, and are you willing to share it?
No. You can't prepare a call. You just can't. What's that? You'll do it?
I said,
yeah, we'll do it.
No, when we looked at the questions before, I said, I guarantee you won't know.
No, there's no way you can, where the only reality television, if you will, that exists is sports, because they're unscripted. Even all, like The Bachelor or The Golden Bachelor or Bachelorette, whatever. Anytime there's a producer, a camera, and a microphone within range, that ain't reality. Sports are the only real impromptu examples of broadcasting. Broadcast television, broadcast radio, whatever. So no, I mean, how can you prepare? If you prepare something, it's going to sound prepared, and you run the risk. And this is a key thing that I tell young broadcasters all the time. If you may have something in your mind in the abstract that you want to get out when making a memorable call, if the circumstances are such that you have time to consider it. But if you have this sort of verbose proclamation ready, you run the risk of tripping over your own tongue, forgetting a word. I mean, you can't do that. Just watch, see it, and say it. That's all broadcasting sports is. See it and say it. And
Okay.
that's why if I'm ever fortunate enough to call that moment, I don't know what I'll say, but I'll enjoy the heck out of saying it.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And we're all
absolutely.
hoping for it for you.
Thank you. I am too. I ain't getting any
And
younger.
one final question from our listeners. This one's from DJ, and he would like to know, what's the biggest unexpected moment that you've ever covered during a Mets game?
Oh, clearly Johan Santana's no hitter. Because when David Freese swung and missed at Santana's 134th pitch of that game, guy who had his shoulder repaired the year before, you know, that whole
Yeah.
backstory. But David Freese swung and missed strike three. That ball had been in Josh Tolley's glove. Josh was the catcher for at least a split second before I actually allowed myself to believe that it was over. He
Yeah.
actually pitched a no hitter. That was, I mean, there were, you know, big hits that you don't expect or comebacks or whatever. But when David Freese struck out to cement Johan Santana's no hitter, that was the greatest moment of disbelief that I ever had making a call. No question.
Oh, that's incredible. To wrap up what we do with all of our guests, quick fire, no thinking, just immediate response questions.
No thinking. It's what I do best.
There's just 3 of them. And I'm sure you've probably been asked these 100 times already anyway. So,
Oh, I thought you were a journalist, Toria. Come on, be original.
well, this isn't so original since we ask all of our guests, but
Okay.
let's go. Let's go. Favorite Mets player, past and present?
I only hesitate because my all-time favorite Met is Gil Hodges. And it was mostly because he managed the Mets to the most unexpected world championship probably in the history of baseball. But I'd also known from my dad when the expansion draft took place that the Mets were getting a well-known player in Gil Hodges, who, yeah, was at the end of his career. But the very first Met game I ever attended in 1962 at the Polo Grounds, Gil hit a home run. It would be the last home run of his career.
Wow.
And in fact, that home run made him at that moment the all-time leading National League home run hitter among right-handed batters. Which sounds like a narrow subset, but it was pretty significant. Plus, that home run moved him ahead of Ralph Kiner, of all people. So
Yeah.
between that and what he did managing the Mets, I've always said Gil Hodges is my all-time favorite Met. As far as today is concerned, how could you not love Brandon Nimmo? You know, and
Yeah.
I don't like singling guys out among the guys I cover now, but Brandon's just such a special guy. And you know, again, I didn't hesitate. I'll stand by it. Brandon Nimmo today.
Amazing. Okay. I feel like we've probably covered this, but it might not be necessarily one that you've called. Your favorite Mets moment?
3:17 p.m., October 16th,
Yeah,
1969, when Cleon Jones went down to one knee and caught Davy Johnson's fly ball to win the 1969 World Series. Nothing like it. Nothing like being 15 years old when your favorite team wins. And, you know, a lot of people will say, who were asked that question of a certain age, when the ball went through Bill Buckner's legs or when Orozco struck out Marty Barrett. But for me, age 15, Mets fan since day one, final out of the 69 World Series was just incredible.
Love that. And finally, you have Steve Cohen's checkbook. You can sign anyone. Who are you signing?
I don't know, but I know I'm going somewhere really nice. Let me tell you something. With a sizable checkbook, I'm not sure. Well, if I had that checkbook, I'd buy the team from him.
That's fair.
I mean,
Fair.
who wouldn't want to run the Mets, right? Steve
Well,
did.
Yeah.
Steve
Yeah.
did, so. Nah, I don't know. Who am I? What was the question again?
Doesn't
See,
matter.
I told you I can't remember anything anymore.
Anyone active?
Anyone
They
active?
can be in a contract. It doesn't matter.
Well, when you've seen what Shohei Ohtani is, which is, they call him a unicorn.
Yeah.
He may be the greatest player who's ever played the game, right?
Yeah.
So if, you want to give me Shohei Ohtani for the Mets, I'd say giddy up.
There we go. Perfect.
And Howie, I have one little request from you.
Sure.
Can we have a put it in the books?
Yeah. Let's see if I remember the words. I told you my memory is going. Feels like a long time since I've been of the good fortune to say, put it in the books. How's that?
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Thank you.
My
That
pleasure.
wraps us up for this evening. Guys, we hope that you have enjoyed it. Please feel free to like, share, comment, all that good stuff so that we can continue bringing you lovely Mets content with a UK twist. Howie, thank you again so much for giving your time, for joining
My
us.
pleasure. Toria, Tracy, great talking to you. I hope to see you in City Field, at City Field next season.
Absolutely.
Always counting down.
You got it.
Yeah.
Make sure to come
Next
see
year.
us.
Yes, we will.
Okay,
We
take
will.
care. Great seeing
All
you
that
both.
leaves us to say, let's go
Let's
Mets.
go Mets.
You got it. Take care.
Thank you.